And welcome back. Now, the late Tito Mboweni has been praised for his role in shaping South Africa's labour legislation and also driving South Africa's post-apartheid economic transformation. He was appointed as the first Democratic Minister of Labour in 1994, a position that he held until he became the first black governor of the South African Reserve Bank between 1999 and 2009. Now, during his tenure as Minister of Finance between 2018 and 2021, Mboweni had also to deal with many challenges, including South Africa's slow economic growth, fighting corruption, and the economic impact of the COVID-19 pandemic. So to talk to us about Tito Mboweni's legacy, we are joined virtually now by current Governor of the South African Reserve Bank, Lesetja Kganyago. Mr. Kganyago, thanks for your time. Welcome to Morning Live.
Good morning.
Mr. Kganyago, as the first black South African Reserve Bank governor, how instrumental was Tito Mboweni in shaping the central bank's future and also maintaining financial stability at a very difficult time?
I think Tito's contribution goes way beyond him being the governor of the Reserve Bank. He shaped the post-apartheid economic policy before he even joined government. He was instrumental in setting out the economic policy of a post-apartheid government, including, by the way, championing the independence of the central bank even before the constitution was written. And Tito had a beautiful policy brain, and that beautiful policy brain could be felt across various aspects of economic policy, from labor to trade and industry to finance to central banking. And his departure would leave a very big vacuum in terms of economic policy discourse in South Africa.
So you're so right about, his role overall that he played in this South African dispensation and shaping what we have today. And out of the public eye, Mboweni held many roles and was respected by the global economic community. But what would you say were some of his achievements that shaped this legacy within the sector?
Well, firstly was that Tito helped position post-apartheid South Africa amongst financiers and investors globally. And secondly was that he would be one of those people who understood that you are recognized globally because you are successful at home. And so when in 2000, which was literally a year after he assumed a role as governor, South Africa introduced an inflation targeting framework that actually provided an anchor for monetary policy. By 2001, Tito negotiated with or came with a proposal which was accepted by Trevor Manuel to put together structures between the Treasury and the Reserve Bank so that the coordination of the interaction of fiscal and monetary policy could actually be entrenched. And they put together this MOU where the staff of the Reserve Bank and of the Treasury would interact with each other, from macroeconomic policy to financial sector policy to international relations and so forth. And till this day, that MOU is still what is guiding the interaction between the National Treasury and the South African Reserve Bank. Put simply, he had entrenched an institutional framework that outlived the individuals that were there, being himself and Trevor Manuel. Long after they had left, the institutions are continuing to function adequately.
And if we look at his role in basically working to maintain confidence in South Africa's financial system, we're reminded also of that 2007-2008 global financial crisis. Talk to us about his leadership in navigating that very volatile period and also making sure that our financial systems and our banks, for example, managed to survive this pretty much unscathed.
that contribution is very important. But I think that what is being missed is Tito's ability to build institutions, but not just build institutions. Make sure that the institutions are staffed by people with adequate levels of training. And he spent a lot of time making sure that people study and are trained in economics. And up to the time of his passing, he was sitting on the board of the Asia School of Business, which is focused on training future central bankers. So he had the passion for the institutions, but also a passion to train people to assume significant roles in these institutions.
And one can never underestimate the importance of that, especially when we look at a state and, you know, very often we hear, for example, at municipal level about professionalizing and, you know, capacitating the state at that level. That brings into stark focus, I suppose, the sort of vision that Tito Mboweni had for the South African Reserve Bank and the financial sector for the state overall.
Well, it is of course a significant contribution. You know, he in a way also helped to demystify central banking. You know, the programs that Tito introduced, from monetary policy forums to the announcements of the central bank being transparent, public, open press conference, became a very important contribution. It was something that was not done before he assumed the role of a governor. And as it stands even today, we still have those monetary policy forums in various, in all of our provinces. And we have now complemented it with a monetary policy schools a challenge. So Tito understood that for policy to become effective, people need to understand what is at stake. Importantly, understand that in policy making, there are trade-offs. You've got to make trade-offs. We've got to disabuse the public of a notion that says that you can have enough of everything. There are tough choices to be made. And he understood that he had such a beautiful policy brain that helped guide this economic policy discourse.
This is so true, and one remembers, you know, how he would deliver those speeches in order to try and make us understand those difficult trade-offs that needed to be made. But also, you know, just going back to that legacy in terms of what he effected, exchange control liberalization, as an example, overseeing the gradual relaxation of exchange controls that made it easier for South Africans to invest abroad as well. So, again, very important sort of work that was done that perhaps the public wasn't too focused on, Governor Kganyago.
No, very important work. But I mean, also the fact that when he became the Minister of Finance, he became the Minister of Finance at a very difficult time. The economy was hardly growing, and then we got hit by the COVID pandemic. And still he understood, even during those periods, that there are difficult trade-offs to be made. And he made those difficult decisions, even at the cost that he would be attacked by his own comrades for taking those difficult decisions. But he understood decisions must be made, difficult as they are. The worst position to be in is indecision.
And then, as you rightly point out, sometimes led to strained relationships between himself and others in government, because Tito Mboweni was just that guy. He stood fast in what he believed and, you know, basically nailed his colors to the mast. He fiercely defended the SABC's independence as well. And there's a lot that has gone on around that particular matter over the years. So, you know, let's talk about that and his defense of this independence, because we've seen over the years people calling for perhaps the nationalization of the South African Reserve Bank. What was Tito Mboweni's view per se on that particular matter?
Well, two things. Firstly was that Tito believed in central bank independence long before he became a governor of the Reserve Bank. He was part of the Transitional Executive Committee that inserted the clause that guaranteed the independence of the central bank into the constitution, and it was a very important contribution. But he also lived the belief in central bank independence. He championed central bank independence, and when you talk to his peers globally, they would talk about how a fierce defender, staunch defender of central bank independence that he was, and that importantly is that once you are in an institution led by Tito, you must also know that he will steer the institution, but not just steer the institution. He would shield and protect you from call it enemies of what you are actually standing for. And when he became the finance minister, he said to me, Governor number 10, and I couldn't even call him minister, I just called him number 8. So I said to him, number 8, you are here now, I am now stepping away from this debate. And he said, leave the politics to us, we will deal with this. And so he carried the burden on behalf of the central bank. But importantly, on the issue of nationalization, he penned a very short piece that spelled out the history of how the central bank ended up with private shareholders and why it will serve no purpose to try and nationalize the central bank, because this is now a creature of the constitution. So he didn't just verbalize things, he also had a very good pen, and he translated a lot of his ideas to paper.
Indeed. And speaking of, his tenure as a Minister of Finance, appointed to that portfolio in 2018 at a time when the Reserve Bank was under attack and, its independence was threatened. I'm curious about the sort of conversations that you and him had, dealing with this matter, especially as it pertains to corruption in the public sector.
Well, I mean, he was a staunch activist against corruption. But for me, the conversation with Tito had most of the time to do with broad policy and the interaction of different policy levers. And so when we said that he is responsible for fiscal policy, we are responsible for monetary policy, and we said, but that is not where growth was going to come from. There are constraints to growth, and how do you remove those constraints to growth? And that is where he conceptualized the idea of Operation Vulindlela, which he then said, we have got to bring in the presidency in here. And, again, Tito believed in evidence. So even when the treasury said that this is going to be Operation Vulindlela, these are the things that must be done, he said, can you quantify what the impact of this would be? And that is Tito. You don't just come with a policy that you just pull out of the head. He would like to know, where is the evidence? Where is the data to substantiate the policy proposal that is being put? What are the policy trade-offs? What are the alternatives on the table? And how do we know that the one that we are going with is the best under the circumstances? Such a beautiful policy brain that is going to be sorely missed in the South African policy discourse.
Indeed. And, Governor Kganyago, as you say that, it just reminds one of, how they say when people start to degenerate to call each other names is because they have no substantial argument to present. And when I think about it, I don't remember Tito Mboweni ever descending into that sort of arena where he needed to resort to calling people names because of what you just explained there to us. So just as a final closing thought, what's going to be your lasting memory of Tito Mboweni?
Well, for me, Tito was more than a colleague. He was a dear friend, and to the extent that his kids would call me uncle, my children would still refer to him as Uncle Tito. I don't remember my children ever calling him governor or minister. For them, he was just uncle. He will be sorely missed.
Governor Kganyago, thank you so much for your time. Governor of the South African Reserve Bank, Lesetja Kganyago, talking to us about the legacy that has been left by the late former SARB governor and former Minister of Finance, Tito Mboweni, who passed away this past Saturday.